Myself, Dr. PJD Kalyani, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering of Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In this video, today we will discuss about levels of programming languages. After completion of this video, the student will able to understand what are different levels of programming languages and what are the features of each levels of programming language and what are the softwares that can be needed for conversion of one level of programming language to the another level. The basic agenda of this video is introduction related to the levels of programming languages. What are various levels of programming languages? What is low-level language, high-level language, middle-level language? What are linkers and loaders? The major components of the computer can be classified into two categories. One is the hardware and software. The physical equipment of the component of the computer are generally referred as the hardware, like the mouse, keyboard, the modem. All these are the various hardware components of the computer. But the software is related to the instructions or programs. The collection of programs written for a specific objective is generally referred as the software. So here it is a collection of programs. What task the computer has to be performed can be initiated by the user with the help of the programs or by commands or instructions. So how these programs has to be written or what are the language they has to be used can be under the category of levels of programming language. By using any familiar programming language, the user can construct the program or instruction in order to activate any functionality, in order to perform any functionality, intended functionality by the computer. So here a programming language comes under the category of software. So the language is generally used here to communicate with the computer. So the mode of communication by the user with the computer is generally the programming language. So here a programming language is a computer language and is used by the programmers or developers to communicate with the computer. And here we are having a varieties of programming language. By using these programming languages, the user can write the set of instructions. So to perform any specific, by using any specific language to perform any intended task or functionality. Here the user can able to write either the application programs or the system programs. Application softwares are generally used in order to perform one specific objective or functionality, like to maintain library information, library management system, to maintain patient details and hospital transactions, hospital management system. Like that one specific application, the software can be constructed with the help of application software. But in order to control internal functionality of the system, then we can go for the system software. Operating system comes under the category of system software. Not only operating system, compiler, interpreters, linker, loaders, all these comes under the category of the system software. So here a language comes under the category of the software. So a programming language is mainly used to develop variety of applications like desktop application, websites and mobile applications. So what are the various categories of languages? Majorly there are three levels of programming languages. One is the low level language, next middle level language, next high level language. Low level language is again categorized into two parts, that is machine language and assembly language. So what are the factors that can be considered for categorization of these levels of programming languages? Majorly, the parameters that are considered is human readability and how the user can easily understand and how he can easily code, debug. Based on that, the human readability, the languages are categorized. So this is the first parameter that can be considered for categorizing the languages. Next is uh, how the program execution speed can be the next parameter that can be considered. So here, if at all the language is more close to the hardware and it can be quickly understood by the hardware, so that the speed of execution of the program can be high. Next is language. So based on that, the language levels, how the conversion of one level to another level has to be taken care is the next parameter. So the factors that can be considered during these categorization of levels of programming language are human readability, program execution speed, and the language level. Now coming to the low level languages. What are low level languages? So low level languages are the machine dependent programming language. So here they are developed for a processor. So they can has to be dependent on the machine. So portability, lack of portability is there for the low level languages. So the machine understandable languages are generally the low level languages. So low level language has little or no interaction with computer instruction set. So the software instruction set, it is not having any interaction. Low level languages are used to first and second generation computer. Here various generations of computer we discussed in the last videos. So during the first generation computer, the major electronic component that can be used is the vacuum tube. And the second generation computer, the major electronic component that can be used the transistors. So in these generations of computer, the example of these generations of computers are ENIAC and UNIVAC. In these computers, the low level programming languages can be used. The low level programming languages are again further categorized into machine language and assembly language. So what is machine language? So machine language is the code, low level language code comprises of binary digits. So the binary digits are zeros and one. So by using these digits, the code can has to be constructed. That code is referred as the machine language code. So here if you observe, it is constructed with the digits of 1 and 0. So it is the code machine language code. So every program, video, image and character text representation is in the form of binary. So this is understood directly by the processor. So this is the machine code or the machine language pertaining to that particular processor or CPU. So the instructions in the machine language must be a stream of zeros and ones like this. What are the advantages and disadvantages of these low level languages? So here the low level language is very close to the hardware. The machine can quickly understand the binary data. So the speed of execution can be high in case of the machine language. And the computer can understand instruction immediately. So no translation is required in the case of the machine language. What are the disadvantages? So here writing the machine level language is very difficult and clumsy process. Why? Because it consists of a stream of zeros and ones. For a user to construct this code is a complex task. Every machine level language has its own category. So the stream has to be understood. So it is a machine dependent. Programming is very difficult to understand. So which leads to difficulty in identifying the bugs, and debugging process can also be very complex in case of the machine language. So difficult to isolate an error. It is a very complex task to identify and rectify the errors in the machine language code. So these are the advantages and the disadvantages of the machine language. So under the low level language, the next category is the assembly language. The assembly language, somewhat user understandability has to be increased with the help of mnemonic. Mnemonics are the code words to perform one specific operation. So here an assembly language is a low level programming language designed for a specific type of processor. So it is also the processor dependent. So it also the portability of the code is very low in case of the assembly language. Assembly language program is constructed by using the mnemonics so that the readability of the code can be increased in case of assembly language. Assembly language code can be converted to machine code using the assembler. The system can understand the stream of binary code that is in the form of zeros and ones. But the assembly language for user readability, increase of user readability, the code can use some mnemonics. For example, if you observed here, MOV is the instruction that the mnemonic that can be used in the assembly language. So here the move mnemonic cannot be understood by the machine. So there is a need for the converter or the translator. The translator that can be used for converting the assembly language code into the machine language code is the assembler. So here the example of some mnemonics that can be used in the assembly programming language is MOV, add, like this. So if you observed these instructions, here this is the machine language code. The machine language code is completely a stream of binary digits, ones and zeros. But here assembly language can use some code words, the mnemonic, to specify the specific operation. So this conversion, the assembly language to machine language conversion has to be done with the help of the assembler. What is the disadvantages and advantages of the assembly language program? The assembly language program can be easy to understand. Why? Because the mnemonic can increase the readability of the code. So the user can easily understood the code and he can identify the errors somewhat easily compared to the machine language, and debugging process can also be facilitated in case of assembly language. So high efficiency, more control on the hardware. Why? Because it is also the processor dependent. What are the disadvantages of assembly language is it is machine dependent. So portability cannot be there and it requires the translator. Assembler is the translator that can be used here to convert the assembly language instructions into the machine language instructions. Difficult to learn and write the programs. Still we have to learn what are the mnemonics and how to give the operands for the assembly language instruction. What are various addressing modes. Then only the user can able to write the assembly language instructions. Slow development time and less efficient. So these are the disadvantages of the assembly language program. So 3 levels of programming languages are there. One is low level language, high level language and middle level language. In the low level language, we discussed about the again 2 subcategories that are the machine language as well as the assembly language. Machine language can be directly understood by the computer, but the assembly language need the translator that is called the assembler for converting assembly language program into the machine language. So this is the example of the assembly language code. So here the mnemonic LDA and this is the operands. And here move is another instruction. And here the operands are H, A. So like this, some mnemonics, a list of mnemonics can be available for the processor. By using these mnemonics, the code has to be constructed in case of assembly language. Next category of levels of programming language is high-level programming language. The high-level programming language instructions are written using the natural language such as English. So, human understandable languages generally considered as high-level programming languages. Here, what is the code written in the programming language? Once reading or observing this code, the user can gain for what purpose the program has to be written, so that the readability is more in case of high-level programming language. So, understandability is more. So, it is very easy to identify the errors which can facilitate the debugging process also. So, commonly used high-level languages, variety of high-level languages are available. These are COBOL, C++, Pascal, Java, all these comes under the high-level programming language. It is very easy to write and understand high-level language programs. Why? Because they are written like a natural language like English. So, to code the program and to understand the program, it is very flexible for the user. When compared to the low-level language, machine language and assembly language, high-level language can be more easily understood by the users. So, computer can understand these languages very quickly so that it can facilitate to detect and identify the errors. But the computer can understand the binary language or the machine language. But these high-level programming languages can be written in the natural language like English. So, here also a converter or translator can be required. So, here the converter can be called as compiler or interpreter. So, here by using this compiler and interpreter, the high-level language code can be converted into machine language. But the compiler can convert whole program at a time, but the interpreter can convert line by line. So, these are the software codes which can be used for the same purpose, that is conversion of high-level language code to the machine-level language code. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages of high-level language programs? So, here the high-level language is very easy to learn and easy to understand, so that the user can code quickly the programs and take less time to write, and easy to maintain and better documentation. So, they are not the machine dependent or the processor dependent. They can facilitate the portability of the code. And here, what are the disadvantages? Needs translator. So, here compiler or interpreters are required to convert the high-level language program into machine-level language, and requires high execution time. Why? Because it cannot have close interaction with the hardware, so it requires some execution time, poor control on the hardware and less efficient. So, these are the disadvantages of high-level languages. So, here one example of high-level language code. Whenever you observe the language code, so you can easily understand the header files required to be included, the main functionality. Here the output statement hello world has to be printed. So, by reading the code, the user can gain what is the functionality of the code. So, the readability of the understandability of the code can be increased in case of high-level languages. So, but if you are observed the machine language code, it is a stream of zeros and ones. So it is very difficult for what purpose the code can has to be written. And somewhat the readability can be increased by incorporating the mnemonics in case of assembly language. So the incorporation of mnemonics leads to need for a translator, that is the assembler. But in case of high level language, those can has to be written like using the natural language. So the translator can has to be needed here. That can be either the compiler or the interpreter. Next, the third level of programming language is the middle level programming language. Middle level languages is a combination of high level language and the low level language. So here the example of these middle level languages are C, for, all these languages comes under the category of middle level programming languages. So by using this, the user can write the high level language code and he can easily access the hardware by using some features available in this language. So both language features can has to be supported in the middle level language. So it is a combination of high level language and the low level language. Computer can understand only the machine language. So a conversion can has to be needed here. The converter here also, either the compiler or interpreter, can be used to convert these middle level language program into the machine code. So here the example of middle level language, you can write the code like this for adding the two numbers. The first number can has to be taken from the user. The second number can be taken as input and both numbers can be added here. The sum can be stored in another variable and the sum can be printed here. So like this, you can write the high level language programs, or by using ASM facility, you can construct the assembly language program can also be executed. So what is the three levels of programming language? How they are related to each and other can be illustrated by this diagram. So here this is the hardware component. So the hardware components can be the internal components of the computer, the physical equipment of the computer. The low level languages can be very close to the hardware. They can directly understand the hardware component, these languages. After that, middle level languages can come into picture. So by using middle level languages, you can write the low level language code as well as high level language code. So here both the features can has to be supported by middle level language. So the second language that can be close to the hardware is the middle level language. The high level language is very close to the human languages. Like the natural language uses can has to be available in case of high level language. Very high level language are the procedure oriented language, which can has to be directly understood and incorporate the features of the natural language, and the readability can be very high in case of very high level languages. So this is the overlapping of the various levels of languages. So here the machine dependent languages are generally more the low level languages. The low level languages are machine language as well as assembly language. So when compared to the levels of languages, the overview. So in a high level language, by using the natural language, you can give an instruction like C is equal to A plus B in a program. That means A variable, B variable can be added and the sum can be stored in the C variable. But in the case of assembly language, we have to use the respective mnemonic for calculation of addition. So it can be generally the add. So here the operands can has to be stored in the registers and can be supplied to the mnemonic add. So in the assembly language, the mnemonic add can be used and the operands can be specified. In case of machine language, it can be represented as a stream of zeros and ones, the binary code. So here the zeros and ones, the same instruction can be specified. So when it is very difficult to the user to understand this code directly, and somewhat the readability can be increased by incorporation of mnemonic in case of assembly language. But coming to the high level languages, they are written by using the natural languages. So this machine code can be easily understood directly by the hardware. This is the overview of the programming languages. Now we have to compare what are various levels of programming languages. First we have to take the low level languages, machine assembly, and we can compare with the high level language with various features. The first feature is the form, in which form the code has to be represented. So in the machine language, the code can be represented in the form of zeros and ones. In case of assembly language, mnemonics can be used. But in case of high level language, the natural language, normal English can be used for the construction of the programs. The next feature is machine dependent. How fast the hardware can be understand these levels of programming languages. So machine languages are dependent to the hardware. Assembly can also be dependent on the processor, so that the mnemonics can be varied from processor to processor. And here the high level languages are independent of the processor, so that it can support the portability or migration of the code from one platform to the another platform. The next feature is the translator. The machine language can be directly understood by the computer. Why? Because it is written in the form of binary digits. So no need of translator in case of machine level language, but a translator is needed in case of assembly language. That translator is called the assembler. Why? Because to convert these mnemonics are introduced in the assembly language. So to convert these assembly language program into binary or machine code, assembler can be needed. And here high level language is purely formed by using the natural language English. So to convert this, we can use either compiler or the interpreter. Next is execution time. Here the machine language can be easily understood by the hardware. The speed of execution can be more. So within less time, the program can be executed. In the assembly language also less time. But in case of high level language, it requires time. Next is languages, only one. Here machine code. But here different manufacturers use different assembly language codes. Here variety of high level programming languages are there. Nature of accessibility, coding, understanding and debugging the code is, in the machine language it could be somewhat difficult. Assembly language is also difficult, but in high level language it can be easy. The memory space that can be occupied in case of machine language is less. Assembly language is also less. In case of high level language it can be more. So these are the comparison of various levels of programming language by considering various parameters. Next, what are the translators that can be needed for conversion of one level of language, programming language, to the another level of programming language? So here this is the machine code and this is the assembly language program and this is a high level code. The assembly language program to machine language conversion, we require the assembler. And here for high level language code to the machine language code, we require either the compiler or the interpreter. Now we'll see what is assembler. Assembler is the computer program that converts the assembly language instruction into machine language instruction. Varieties of assemblers are they available in the market. They are 6502 assembler, ARM assembler, all these examples of the assembler. So the assembler can take the input of assembly language instruction and can convert into the machine language instruction, which can directly understand by the processor. Next, compiler. Compiler is also a software which converts high-level language code into the low-level language code, but it can convert whole program at a time. After compilation of entire code, it can list what are the errors that are present in the code. The examples of various compilers are COBOL, Pascal, Fortran compilers. So, the compiler can take the input as high-level language and it can convert it into the machine language code, but the whole program at a time. Next, interpreter. Interpreter and compiler functionality can be same. So, both has to be used to translate the high-level language program to machine level language program. But compiler can translate the whole program at a time, but interpreter can translate one line at a time. So, it can translate the first line of the program, and if at all any error occurred in the first line, it can stop the conversion process and wait for the user to correct those error. If the error is corrected, then it can move to the next line of the code. So, here the interpreter can convert line by line the high-level language code to the machine-level language code. Example, basic, Python are the interpreters. So, here the interpreter takes the high-level language code and convert into the machine-level language. So, here what is the differences between various translators? So, the translators that are available are assembler, compiler and interpreter. So, here the assembler can take the assembly language and it has to convert into the machine code. So, the low level language has to be taken and it can be converted into machine code. But compiler and interpreter can take high level language as input and can convert into the machine code. And when this assembler has to be dependent on the hardware, but it has to be written by using particular languages, and interpreter can also be using the language. The software has to be coded, and one instructions translated to the one-to-one translation has to be done in case of assembler, but here compiler can be one-to-many. Why? Because it can convert the whole program at a time. But in case of interpreter also line by line, so there is also a one-to-many instruction, but one-to-one has to be done if at all any errors has to be exist in the interpreter. Translate entire program before running. Here also entire program before running it can translate, but instruction by instruction has to be translated with the help of interpreter. So it produces the object code. Here does not produces the object code. So this is the difference between variety of translators, which has to be used for different conversion of one level language program to the another level language program. So what is the interaction between these levels of programming languages? So here the bottom level is the hardware. Upon that the machine code has to be there. The machine code has to be directly in the stream of ones and zeros. So it can be directly understood by the hardware. Assembly language can contain some mnemonic. With the help of assembler, those has to be converted into the machine language, can be directly understood by the hardware. On the top of this, the high level language code can be placed, and they are very close to the natural language and it is very user friendly level of programming language, so that the user can easily code and can easily understand, debug the program code. So how the assembling of the program has to be done. So here, after converting by using the assembler, the assembly language code has to be converted into machine language. But here, before that, after compilation or assembler, the object code has to be prepared. For example, if you written a code that is first.c in the C language, after compilation, it has to be converted into first.obj, the object code. For this object code, the linker links some header files, and loader can prepare the memory, so that this object code has to be converted into executable program first.exe. Now, what is this linker and loader? In the execution of the program, these linker and loader are the two utility programs. They play the major role during the execution of the program. So what is the source code? That code can be compiled. After compilation, it has to produce the object code. After object code, what are the needed additional files can be supplied this OBJ code with the help of linker, so that executable file has to be available. .exe file can be available here. So the loader can prepare the memory and loads these executable files in the memory, so that the program can be easily executed. So these linker and loader are the two utility programs that can be required and can be helpful during the execution of the program. So a linker is a special program that combines the object files generated by the compiler and assembler. Okay. So in order to originates an executable file, the linker, what is the required needed files, library files can be added to the object file. The loader is also a special program that takes the input of the object code from the linker and loads it into the main memory, prepares for the execution by the computer. Now we'll see what is the difference between this linker and loader. The main function of the linker is to generate the executable files, whereas the main objective of the loader is to load the executable files in the main memory. The linker takes input of the object code that is generated from the compiler and the assembler. And here loader takes input of the executable file generated by the linker. So here these two are the major utility programs that can be used for smooth execution of the code. So linker can combine all object modules, but the loader can allocate addresses to the executable codes or the files. So linker is also responsible for arranging objects in the program address space, but loader also responsible for adjusting references which are used within the program. So these are the two utility programs that can be used for after converting the program into the object code, how it can be converted into exe file with the help of linker, and how these linked exe file can be loaded successfully in the memory with the proper address spaces and with references can be done with the loader. So this is the difference between linker and loader. So in this video, we discussed about why the programming levels of programming languages are needed and what are various categories of programming levels of programming language and what factors, based on what factors these levels are categorized, and what are the differences between these levels of programming languages with all parameters can be explained. And next we move to the What are the converters needed for conversion of one level programming language to the another level, and what is the features of these converters, and what are the differences between these converters. Next, after conversion, how the executable file can be created and how memory can be allocated for the file by using linker and loader. What are the differences between these two utility programs can be explained in this video. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.